Hello everyone, this is Tom Uren. I'm here with another Between Two Nerds discussion with the Grugq. G'day Grugq, how are you?
G'day Tom, fine and yourself?
I'm very well. This week's edition is brought to you by Authentic, the open source identity provider. Find them at goauthentic.io, and that's authentic with a K. So Grugq, the last couple of weeks there have been, pretty big pieces of news related to iOS exploits that have been found in the wild, particularly by Google. So a couple of weeks ago, there was the Karuna exploits.
You go Australia?
They appear to have been leaked from a defence contractor with strong Australian links, I've got to say, and that was like top-notch exploit engineering. It had a very capable set of
really
exploits.
world-class. Yeah.
And then just this week, Google has also reported on something called Dark Sword, which is more limited in the number of versions of iOS that it could exploit.
It's overall much poorer quality compared to, say, a real, authentic Australian-made toolchain. You know,
so
don't settle for knockoffs. You know, you don't know what you're getting. Buy Australian.
It didn't have the Made in Australia sticker on it. And so my first thought is, does this tell us anything? Does it actually mean that iOS security is terrible and has all of a sudden actually gone backwards, that we've got these kits that are...
Right. Is this some sort of like watershed event where now it's like the dam has broken, all of the known bad stuff about iOS is out in the open, and we've been kept in the dark about the vulnerabilities that we're carrying around, and now it's all coming out.
Yep, open season on Apple devices.
Yeah, no, not at all. I think just if you look at the Karuna stuff, like the amount of engineering. So there's a podcast that came out on Risky Business that is like a 90-minute deep dive into the engineering.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's some truly amazing stuff. Like you listen to that and you don't go like, oh, I guess everyone's going to be doing this now.
I also thought the history of where that exploit kit had been deployed was interesting in that it covered many years of iOS versions, and it wasn't detected until, in effect, this is my interpretation, that it had been sold on. So it was like the third or the fourth purchaser.
It wasn't until it got to the criminals who were just going after the crypto wallets.
Yep. And so that implied to me, at least, that the initial purchaser had used it very carefully. So it hadn't been picked up by Google, who finally detected it, because they were using it in a very OPSEC careful way. So it was. I'm interpreting that to mean that it was very targeted.
Right. So I would absolutely agree, and I think that it's. Like, it makes sense, because if you're paying millions of dollars for something, you want to use it for things that justify that expense. I guess another way is, if there's something important enough to you that you would spend $1 million trying to gain access to it, like, you probably want to be careful about that. Right?
Yeah,
like, you don't want to...
You want to get return on investment.
Yeah, and you want to... Like, there's probably more than one of those things at that point. Like, you're...
Probably more than one person you want to hack.
Exactly, right? And so, you're going to be careful and spare. You're going to use sort of as much as you need plus one, I guess, right? Like, if you can get away with doing a phishing attack, you'll use a phishing attack. If you can use, an end day, you'll use an end day. If you have to use an iOS O day, then it's going to be worth it, sort of thing. And so, yeah, it looks like they were careful, probably even for the first. So, like, there's the authentic purchaser, which was the U.S. government, and probably some other Five Eyes nations, and it was never detected. Like, my understanding is that if it was detected, the bugs would be killed, but the campaign would not be exposed.
Right.
Sort of thing, right? Like, Google would, they might have the courtesy of informing NSA, like, we're going to kill your bug, but they're not going to blow the whole campaign. They might give them like 90 days and et cetera. But so it went from there to the Russians, and then it went from there. Ultimately, it ended up being used by Chinese crypto wallet hackers who very likely did not pay $1 million for it. And
I think by that time it was viable for like a relatively small percentage of
it was
iOS.
all historic at that point. Yeah.
So people who hadn't updated, had old phones, whatever.
What that says to me is that while it was a viable nation state tool, it was being sold to nation states at the high price. Once it had aged out and it was no longer as useful to a state, the seller was probably looking at how can I sort of squeeze a last little bit of value out of this depreciating asset, which is when they would go to sort of anyone.
Right. So that might be something like you've got an exclusive license to use this thing that we've stolen for X number of years or something, or while it's N-1 current or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. So like, I mean, the way I would say it is you sell it for big money to people who will pay big money. When they get to a point where they're no longer going to buy it, like they're not interested in it anymore because it's old, you then look at anyone who's willing to pay for something that might be valuable to them. And you'll probably find, like the crypto wallet guys will be like, look, I'll give you 200,000 for it. Right. It's worth something, but not very much. I mean, 200,000 is quite a lot of money, but compared to the millions that you were getting before, it's a bit of a huge letdown. But yeah, like that's what I would assume would happen. At which point it gets burned because these guys have paid very little money for it, and they just want to hit as many things as they can to try and make their 200,000 back, and then some. And they just and to be clear, the crypto criminals in this case, they had a watering hole attack, or they had a watering hole. People visiting the site, it would try and grab their crypto wallet for passphrases or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they had a mechanism to actually turn it from an exploit into money again. And actually, and so that's still a very high value activity, actually, because there's probably, I can't think of a better way to turn an exploit into money directly. So, it's still, I guess, quite valuable. Now, that was Karuna, which is the U-Butte top tier sort of prime example of that's your AAA game sort of thing. That's your real top end. Now, if you go to like one of the indie level sort of
so the next exploit kit, I guess, that was published this week, there's a couple of different variants. So the top level name that Google gave it is Dark Sword, which I think may have been in the kit itself somewhere.
Yeah,
because they talk about
out of a comment somewhere. Yeah.
And that seems, it's more up to date, but less capable.
Less sophisticated, one might say.
Yes, maybe that's a better word. I mean, once you exploit a device, you've exploited it. It's yes or no. It doesn't matter how beautiful it is, I suppose.
So there's a number of interesting things. One of them is the number of people who purchased it still seems fairly small, right? You've got this...
Right. Yeah. So there's three different reports that I've seen. There's one from Google Threat Intelligence Group, there's one from iVerify, and there's one from Lookout. So the Google report talks about essentially three different groups using the kit, and it seemed like they kind of did their own implant afterwards, to some extent at least. So one was Saudi Arabian users targeted via a Snapchat-themed website.
Okay.
The second one, which they gave a different name, was a Turkish commercial surveillance vendor selling it to users in Turkey and Malaysia. And so that surveillance company is called Pars Defense, P-A-R-S. And then the third user was the Russians, and they'd also used Karuna, and they were targeting people in Ukraine. Right,
and they geofenced the IPs to specifically target Ukrainian users. They were using compromised Ukrainian sites, but then they also geofenced the IPs so that only Ukrainian users that hit those Ukrainian sites would be hit. Like, to me, that says targeted. Like
Yep.
it's a broad target, but it is targeted, right? Like Ukraine is a target.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And I mean, the websites were purporting to be Ukrainian government as well. So
Right. It's niche stuff.
I've got to say, I'm a bit surprised that it was geofenced to Ukraine, but I guess that implies that if you've got a military
That would be a security
purpose,
thing, I would think, right? Because you're going to have Google web crawling,
right? Okay, yep.
right? And you would want to not send your exploit to Google's web crawler or any of the other web crawlers out there. That's how I would interpret that. Not that it was a politeness thing where they just didn't like. In case it's the Polish, we better not hack them. That would go over really badly. It was
Well,
more
I was
like,
just thinking that if it's a military thing and you've got a military purpose, why? I guess it just saves you filling up your database with stuff that is not actionable for what you're trying to do, I guess.
I would agree with that, in that you're probably looking to sort of hit only the targets that you want. And I would say that includes not hitting targets you don't want, such as a Google web crawler or an AI scraper or something like that. So it's a sort of a security mechanism as well, would be my thinking.
Yep. So it's interesting to me, this, like, just looking through the different reports, the very strong vibe you get is it's not as sophisticated, which we'll talk about, I think.
Like, I'm not saying that there's a problem with indie developers sort of putting out their own thing. It's good. We want to have an ecosystem where there's a lot of people taking part, and sort of there can be a lot of creativity outside of these AAA studios.
Yeah.
But,
But I think it's interesting that there was a number of customers immediately, even though it's still a current.
At the time, it was
I
current.
guess it's iOS 18, so more current.
It was current at the time, I think.
Yep.
Or current-ish.
Right. So I think it's interesting that even though it's more current, so it's and hang on, I think the Google said that they had detected it from November 25, which is like hang on,
yeah,
let me look at
but
the
iOS
version.
26 came out in September.
Right. Yeah. So
so
it's possible that it's as soon as you're not current,
these are the
aperture
tier
of customers opens up.
Right. I don't imagine a Turkish surveillance vendor is your number one go-to customer. If you have this capability, you're probably going to try and sell to someone in the West first. You know how I would parse this? NATO customers. Right. Like you're selling this thing, you expand it to like the from Five Eyes to NATO, to at some point it sort of gets resold by someone that you've sold it to. It sort of goes down the chain.
Right, yeah. So Google says they first detected it, if I'm reading their timeline right, in the Saudi Arabian, the customer targeting Saudi Arabian users.
See, I bet you they didn't geofence. That was their mistake.
So I've got to say, some of the stuff in the reports is like quite amusing. So
yeah. So, as we said, that there's these sort of three tiers of use cases: the Turkish, Malaysian axis, the Saudi Arabians, and then the Russian users. It seems like the Turkish surveillance company put quite a bit of effort into customizing, securing, making it more stealthy, adding functionality. Like they took the sort of bare bones raw exploit kit and they customized it to work properly for their environment and to not be easily detected and to do what they needed it to do.
Yep. I mean, Google says, unlike the Saudi activity, this campaign was carried out with more attention to OPSEC, with obfuscation applied to the exploit loader and some of the exploit stages. They used encryption to encrypt exploits between the server and the victim. Yep,
that sounds responsible, I would say. Like, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
However, like we can kind of skip the Saudi one because the Russian one is hilarious, I think.
Yeah.
Like there's not so much info on the Saudi one, but like the Russian one, it's very bare bones. I think that when they purchased the kit, they got it complete with source code. So it's going to have like comments, it's going to have usable names, it's going to be clearly you're going to see clear indications of what everything is.
Right.
And so just to back up ever so slightly, the way that Lookout and iVerify got involved in this is when the Corona announcement came out. Lookout went through all of their data sets, looking for logs and things like that to see, has this thing occurred in our log base? And they found a related URL that had almost the exact same, it had the same components with a small change. And they thought, this might be something. And then they saw that the full URL ended with RCE module.js.
I think some of the names are great. What else is there?
See, I think there's probably just going to be a lot of false positives because you're going to hit, React container element all the time,
Yeah, and the other one is SBox. SBox 0.
Yeah.
SBX 0.
Sandbox escape. and then the next one was PE loader, which is privilege escalation loader. So, but, all of that said, while they didn't seem to have done any customization on the exploits, they did add a bunch of functionality to the implant.
Yeah, so there's a list here of what the capabilities are.
So it does the sort of things that you'd expect, right? So you're getting, the WhatsApp data, the SMS database, call history, contacts, Safari history, the bookmarks, the browser state, the cookies, locations, notes, calendars, photos, health, device identifiers, configuration, preferences, SIM cards, basically
everything that's consistent with state espionage. These are all the things you just grab, right?
Right, just absolutely everything, And then it grabs all the other stuff that you expect. Coinbase, Binance, Ledger, Trezor, Trust Wallet, MetaMask, Electrum, Blockstream, Bread Wallet, Mycelium, Samurai, Blue Wallet.
So, is this just? I presume this is just the Russian state hackers going, oh well, I'm doing a bit of hacking. I may as well make some money on the side, I suppose.
See, I think this is what happens when your recruitment pool includes a lot of people with a criminal background. Right? You go to them, you go look, we've got this kit. What we need you to do is customize it and make it ready for deployment. And so the guy takes it, and rather than going through and changing, RCE loader to widget.js, he goes through and he goes, I see what it's missing. There's nothing for crypto in here. Why don't I just fix that for you, right? My initial thought was that the people selling it probably added some implant functionality of their own so that there'd be a revenue stream in addition to licensing. But it seems that only the Russian one has this one. Only the Russian variant has this capability, which makes me think that it was the operators deploying it who just expanded it.
Yeah, that seems right. It's only that particular one targeted Ukraine that has that.
Yeah, I was going to say, the one other interesting thing about the way that it works is that it runs entirely in JavaScript. At least the Russian one, I'm not sure. I didn't see anything about the others. But it doesn't deploy anything at all, right? There's no persistence mechanism. It doesn't have any injections. It just runs in JavaScript, collects everything in temp, bundles it, exfiltrates it, and then it's done. It leaves the device, which is that's a very weird way of operating, except it's it's surprisingly good OPSEC for people who use RCE loader for a module of their exploit kit, right? It's incredibly light touch, except that, it isn't.
Well, I was thinking about that in the context of what you said about recruiting criminals. And so perhaps that, there's a way of doing things that is still inherited from the good times. Right. And now you've got people operating within that framework of, well, yeah, no, we don't do the work to put in persistent implants.
I mean, once someone's wallet is drained, they're not going to top it up again on the same phone.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the things that you grab are like account credentials and authentication tokens and stuff like that. So you don't need to necessarily stay on the device.
Right. Once you have their authentication tokens, who cares what they do afterwards? You're better off not leaving traces, actually. Like it's the better way to handle it.
So overall, I think that it seems like a tale of two types of implants or two types of exploit kits here, where you've got the U-Boot super duper one, and then you've got this newer version, not as good, but they're still falling in the same operational paradigm of when they're very, very, very valuable, they're used carefully and with a lot of OPSEC. As they age out or become less relevant, they're deployed more widely. At that point, they get picked up by, in this case, in both cases, I guess Google. And at that point, they're patched. In terms of being like a regular person, I'm not thinking that my threat, my risk has changed at all, because
if you update within the first few days of the update becoming available, I think that you would have been safe from all of these.
And there's also lockdown mode as well.
Right.
So I think all the ones I've read, it's basically said if you had lockdown mode, there would have had to be extra
it would not have worked. Right.
Yeah.
Look, if you're targeting someone who's on a version behind, they're not on a version behind and using lockdown mode. Right? Like, it's a Venn diagram with no intersection at all, right? Like it's pretty safe.
Now, having said that, I am not a crypto person, so I feel particularly. Is it safe? I guess so. I feel like I'm not in that target demographic, because that's still a high value target for many people.
I don't have my personal wealth on my phone, which, like if you're doing a risk assessment, I would say that that's probably the problem that you should look at, not how well is your phone protected. It's that it's on your phone. Like, what is wrong with you?
So if you have a crypto phrase, perhaps don't take a photo of it and store it in your phone. Is that that's the take-home message, the big picture take-home message?
The big picture take-home message is update your iOS and forget about this. Like, it's not. If you listen to Between Two Nerds, you're one of the smartest people on the planet, and you're not a target demographic for this because you update your phone. Yeah, so I wouldn't worry about it.
But I kind of think that the listeners of Between Two Nerds are amongst the elite of the cyber policy world.
So look,
right?
I wouldn't worry about this sort of kit. I'd worry about current ones, which
the ones we don't know about. Oh, good. Feels much better.
Yeah, You're not in the sort of second-rate cast-off, hand-me-down exploit kit range. You're at the top-tier, bespoke, tailored, top-end.
Right.
range.
Okay. Yeah, I see the message now. So it's not you and I don't need to worry about it. It's just all our listeners that need to worry about it. What a relief!
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thanks, Grugq.